This sector is now under Coalition control. Stand down your forces immediately, Commander. We are taking this hangar.
The laughter started the moment Sergeant Elias Cord stepped off the shuttle ramp with Rex at his heel. Not polite laughter. Not the awkward kind that beings produce when they encounter something unfamiliar. This was deep, resonant, full-throated alien amusement, the kind that fills a hangar and bounces off metal walls and makes your jaw tighten even when you don't understand a word being said. Elias understood enough. He'd been stationed at the Vareth Unified Command Outpost for exactly 4 minutes, and already the 3-meter-tall Vareth soldiers lining the reception corridor were clicking their mandibles together in the particular rhythm that the xenolinguistics briefing called involuntary comedic response. Their slate-gray carapaces rippled with bioluminescent pulses, amber and gold colors the briefing identified as social amusement. Elias kept walking. Rex kept pace at his left heel, perfectly silent, amber eyes scanning the corridor with the focused calm of an animal that had been in far stranger places than this. Sergeant Cord. The voice came from the far end of the corridor, clipped, precise, carrying the faint synthetic echo of a translator implant. I am Commander Beth-Ra, 4th Intelligence Division, Varath Combined Fleet. The commander was taller than the others, darker. The carapace across his shoulders bore the layered scoring marks of rank. Dozens of thin horizontal lines that meant, according to the briefing, approximately 4 decades of distinguished service. His 4 upper limbs were folded in a formal pattern. His lower pair remained loose, ready. He was not laughing, but his eyes, the large compound eyes that caught light in fractured geometric patterns, were studying Rex with something between contempt and confusion. The human delegation was informed, Beth-Ra said slowly, that this negotiation compound operates under Class 2 sterility protocols. No biological contaminants. No unregistered organisms. He paused. You have brought a creature. His name is Rex, Elias said. He's registered, fully vaccinated. Coalition Military Working Dog. Designation K97741. His paperwork was submitted to your quartermaster's office 6 days ago. Behind Beth-Ra, one of the younger officers made a sound, a short, percussive click, and whispered something to his companion. The amber bioluminescence rippled through the crowd again. Beth-Ra's translator implant didn't catch the whisper, but Elias had been studying Varath for 8 months. He caught enough. The human brought a primitive beast companion to a military negotiation. He must be insane. Or desperate, or both. Beth-Ra studied Elias for a long moment. Then he looked at Rex again. The German shepherd sat perfectly still, watching the commander with those steady amber eyes, ears forward, completely unbothered by the smell of 30 alien soldiers, or the strange geometry of the hangar, or the clicking laughter still dying out around them. Very well, Beth-Ra said finally. The creature may remain, provided it does not interfere with proceedings. He won't interfere, Elias said. He'll just work. Work. Beth-Ra repeated the word with the particular flatness of someone who finds a concept too absurd to argue with. Of course. He turned and walked away. Elias exhaled slowly through his nose. Rex pressed briefly against his left leg, not nervous, just present, just reminding him, I'm here. Yeah, Elias murmured, too quiet for any translator to catch. Me too, buddy. The Varath Unified Command had been in contact with humanity for 11 years. In galactic terms, this made humans approximately as significant as a new species of moss discovered on a mid-tier agricultural world. The Varath had been spacefaring for 600 years. They had encountered 43 other intelligent species. They had conquered 11 of them, absorbed 7 more through political assimilation, and maintained uneasy observation agreements with the rest. Humanity was the 44th. The initial assessment had been filed by a Vareth survey vessel whose captain, by all accounts, had spent approximately 40 minutes in Earth's orbit before composing a report that described humans as biologically unremarkable, technologically adolescent, emotionally volatile, and strategically negligible. The report had been largely correct. What it had missed, what every Varath assessment since had missed, was the thing sitting calmly at Elias Cord's heel, watching a 3-meter alien commander walk away with the focused, patient attention of an animal that had been bred across 15,000 years, specifically for the purpose of reading the world more accurately than the creature beside it. The negotiation was about Kepler Station. Kepler 7 was a transit hub, a mid-deep space fueling and resupply node that sat at the intersection of 3 major shipping corridors. The Verith claimed it fell within their Corridor 7 expansion zone. Humanity claimed they'd been operating a research outpost there for 6 years. The Coalition Diplomatic Corps had been trying to schedule this meeting for 18 months. Elias wasn't a diplomat. He was, technically, an escort. The Coalition had sent Ambassador Petra Voss, a sharp-faced woman in her 60s who had negotiated 3 previous border agreements with 2 other species, and had assigned Elias as her military attaché. Standard procedure. The dog was not standard procedure. It had been Elias's own request, filed through 3 levels of bureaucracy, approved reluctantly by a coalition defense committee that ultimately decided it wasn't worth the political energy to argue about. Rex was trained. Rex was certified. Rex had operational clearance. What the committee hadn't asked, what no one had asked, was why Elias wanted Rex there specifically. The first session lasted 4 hours. Veth-Ra sat across a curved negotiating table from Ambassador Voss and spoke with the precise, measured cadence of someone who had done this many times before and found it faintly tedious. The Varath position was clear. Kepler 7 was within their claimed expansion corridor. The human outpost was a violation. Humanity should withdraw, receive a minor diplomatic concession, and the matter would be closed. Ambassador Voss disagreed. She disagreed carefully, with documentation and historical precedent, and the particular polite firmness that made her extremely good at her job. Elias sat 2 seats behind Voss, slightly to her left. Rex lay under the table at his feet. Nobody paid attention to the dog. This was, in Elias's experience, one of Rex's most important qualities. Rex was invisible until he chose not to be. But Rex was not sleeping. Rex spent 4 hours watching the room. His nose processed what his eyes confirmed, the sharp mineral scent of Varath stress pheromones that their carapaces secreted and that their translator implants were not designed to suppress. The subtle shift in body language when Veth-Ra's second-in-command, a younger officer named Keth Val, tensed at specific mentions of Corridor 7's eastern boundary. The way a particular Varath advisor seated against the far wall went completely still whenever the conversation approached the subject of transit rights rather than territorial rights. Rex couldn't tell Elias any of this in words, but Elias had been working with Rex for 4 years. He watched Rex watching the room. That was enough. The first session ended without agreement. This was expected. First sessions rarely ended any other way. What was not expected was what happened in the corridor afterward. The Varath delegation was moving toward their quarters when Rex, still at heel, perfectly composed, suddenly slowed his pace. His head turned left. His ears pivoted forward. A low sound, not quite a growl, barely audible, built in his chest and stopped. One alert. One clear signal. Elias looked left. There was a door. A maintenance door, slightly recessed into the corridor wall, its surface indistinguishable from the surrounding panels except for the faint rectangular seam around its edge. Nothing remarkable, nothing that should have attracted attention. Elias kept walking, but he noted the door number. And when he returned to the human quarters, he pulled up the station schematic and found that the maintenance corridor behind that door ran directly adjacent to the Verith delegation's private communication suite. He stared at the schematic for a long time. Then he sent an encrypted message to the Coalition's intelligence liaison with 4 words, "Check Corridor M7. Soon." He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. 2 hours later, the intelligence liaison sent back 6 words, "Active listening device. Origin, not Varath." Elias read the message twice. Not Verith. Someone else was listening to this negotiation. Someone who wanted to know what was said in private, on both sides. Someone with a strong interest in the outcome. Someone who had managed to place a device on a Varath-controlled station without triggering the Varath's own security sweeps. He sat back and looked at Rex, who was lying on the quarters floor, watching him with those steady, amber eyes. "Good boy," Elias said quietly. Rex's tail moved once, a single slow sweep. The second session was different. Veth Ra arrived with an altered energy, less measured, more direct. The Varaf political pressure was evidently intensifying. His opening statement was harder than the previous days, more formal, laden with references to Varath Unified Command Authority that Ambassador Voss later described privately as threat-adjacent posturing. 3 hours in, Voss requested a recess. In the side chamber, she looked at Elias across the small table. "They're not going to move on Kepler's territorial status," she said. "We're negotiating toward a transit rights framework instead. Joint management. Our outpost stays. They get formal acknowledgement of the corridor." "That's a reasonable outcome," Elias said. "It is." She paused. Veth Ra's advisor, the one on the far left, he's been watching the dog more than he's been watching me. Elias had noticed this too. The advisor, whose name he confirmed was Surteth, Deputy Minister for Expansion Strategy, had spent the past hour throwing periodic glances at Rex with an expression that, in Varath body language, translated somewhere between calculation and unease. "Let him watch," Elias said. Voss studied him. "What does Rex know that I don't?" "Probably a few things," Elias said. "But right now, the important one is that Surteth is significantly more nervous about this negotiation than Veth Ra is, which means the pressure to reach a specific outcome isn't coming from Veth Ra. It's coming from Surteth's ministry, or from someone above him." Voss was quiet for a moment. "The listening device," she said. "The listening device," Elias confirmed. They looked at each other. "Who benefits," Voss said slowly, "from this negotiation failing?" Elias didn't have the answer yet, but he was starting to have a direction. Rex found the second device on the third day. This one was harder, embedded in the chair that Ambassador Voss had been assigned at the negotiating table. Not in the chair's frame, not in an obvious location, but woven into the material of the seat cushion's inner layer in a configuration that the station's standard security sweep would interpret as part of the cushion's own thermal regulation matrix. Rex had walked past the chair before the morning session began and stopped dead. He sat. He looked at the chair. He looked at Elias. Elias casually stepped forward, placed his hand on the chair's back, and felt, very faintly, a slight asymmetry in the material's resistance near the left rear corner. He suggested the ambassador use a different chair for personal comfort reasons. The device was found and extracted by Coalition security within the hour. This time, its component signature matched the first device exactly. And the materials, when the Coalition technician ran the analysis, weren't Vareth. They weren't human either. They were Keth Nara. The Keth Nara were the 37 species the Vareth had encountered. They were not one of the conquered ones. They were not one of the absorbed ones. They occupied that complicated middle category, formally independent, practically subservient, economically dependent on Varath trade routes in a way that functioned as a very polite version of control. They also, according to the Coalition's intelligence files, had a significant commercial stake in Corridor 7. If humanity retained transit rights through Corridor 7, Keth Nara shipping would face new tariffs and inspection protocols. Their already fragile economic position would deteriorate further. If this negotiation failed and humanity withdrew from Kepler 7 entirely, the Keth Nara would retain exclusive preferential access to the corridor under existing Vareth agreements. Someone in the Keth Nara government was trying to sabotage this negotiation, and they had managed to do it on a Vareth-controlled station, which meant either the Vareth security apparatus had a serious vulnerability, or someone in the Vareth delegation was helping them. Elias sat with this information and thought about Surteth, Deputy Minister for Expansion Strategy, who had been extremely nervous, who had been watching Rex. He requested a private meeting with Commander Veth Ray that evening. This was unusual enough that it almost didn't happen. A military attaché, not the ambassador, requesting direct access to the lead Varath negotiator. But Elias was persistent in the quiet way that tends to eventually produce results, and Veth Ra agreed, apparently out of something that translated functionally as curiosity. They met in a small room near the station's observation deck. Veth Ra arrived without his usual entourage. Elias arrived with Rex. Veth Ra looked at the dog with that same complicated Varath expression, somewhere between contempt and something else that Elias was beginning to identify more precisely. Your creature found both devices, Vethras said. Not a question. Elias looked at him steadily. Yes. Our security sweeps found nothing. Another pause. How? Rex's nose can detect approximately 300 distinct chemical compounds associated with electronic components at concentrations below 1 part per trillion. He's also been trained to recognize 11 specific adhesive and polymer signatures used in covert surveillance manufacturing. Elias paused. He can do things in 10 seconds that our best electronic sweep takes 6 hours to accomplish, and he doesn't create any detectable signal that a listening device could pick up. Veth-Ra was quiet. Rex sat between them, watching the commander with his calm, patient attention. The Kethnara, Veth-Ra said finally. Someone connected to them, Elias said carefully. Not necessarily their government's official position. And someone in my delegation may have enabled access. That's a question for your internal investigation, not mine. Veth-Ra looked at him for a long moment. The bioluminescence across his carapace, which had been the muted blue-gray of formal composure since the meeting began, shifted, very slightly, towards something cooler. You came here to tell me this privately, Veth-Ra said, rather than presenting it through diplomatic channels. Why? Elias considered the question. Because if it becomes an official incident, this negotiation ends. Kepler-7 stays contested, the Kethnara get their outcome. And whoever in your delegation was compromised gets a chance to disappear into the confusion. He paused. If it stays unofficial, you get to handle your internal problem yourself. We continue negotiating. Nobody gets what they actually wanted from this. Veth-Ra studied him. What do humans want from Kepler-7? The outpost, transit rights, joint management framework. Elias shrugged slightly. We'd like to not be evicted from somewhere we've been operating for 6 years. That's it. That's all? Commander, we're 44th on your contact list. We've been spacefaring for about 40 years. We're not trying to take your corridor. We're trying to keep one research station and a reasonable rite of passage. He met Veth-Ra's compound eyes directly. We're not a threat to you. We never were. The room was quiet. Rex made a sound, a soft, quiet exhale, and lay down on the floor between them. His chin rested on his front paws. His eyes remained open, watching. Veth-Ra looked down at the dog for a long time. In 43 previous first contacts, he said slowly, I have never seen a species bring an animal to a military negotiation. I know. We laughed, Veth-Ra said. Not apologetically, just as a statement of fact. When you arrived,